Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. Today's guest is a talented pianist who is here to share with us a multicultural and unique perspective of life. During the pandemic, she started a project on Instagram called Let Femme Talk, where she invited fellow women for interviews, recipes, and more to help rebuild the feeling of a community that so many of us felt the loss of in 2020. Every time I invite a new guest for this podcast and I hear their story, I am always struck by how the similarities in our life experiences or the way those experiences have made us feel outweigh our differences. We are truly less alone than we realize, and so I thank all of you that listen and are brave enough to be vulnerable and share your stories with us. Please join me in welcoming Lana Suran to the show. Lana, I am so happy to have you here with us today.
No, I'm so happy to be here.
It's such a pleasure, really. I'm really quite curious to hear about your story and share it with our listeners, because I think musicians and artists can often feel like nomads, traveling a lot, moving to different countries, living out of a suitcase, and that can leave many of us feeling rootless.
Yes.
I believe that your experience has felt somewhat similar, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd love for you to share with us a bit of your background and your childhood life growing up.
Yes. Wow, you said it so well. So I grew up in Stockholm, Sweden, and in this past 29 years, I've been definitely living sometimes out of a suitcase, sometimes at home, sometimes making new homes. But my life started in Stockholm, and I grew up with a Russian mother and a Kurdish father. So I grew up in a bilingual home and a multicultural home, which now, I'm very grateful for, because it gave me courage to actually leave Sweden when I was 16. I left and moved to the US. I arrived in Natick, Massachusetts for high school studies, not really knowing that this was going to become a 12-year adventure far away from home. But during those 12 years, I was in Natick, I was in Boston, and finished my chapter in New York. So to say that I've moved around is probably an understatement. And today I'm talking to you from Paris. But I think I wouldn't have it any other way. I think it's not really about moving around and packing a new suitcase or finding a place to do laundry or whatever. It's about the experiences we collect in our suitcase, kind of to bring with us as we go along, as we move forward in life. And as musicians, we all know that it's not a fairy tale always. So keeping those wonderful things that I've experienced and seen, and challenges as well, keeping that with me wherever I move or wherever I go is really, I think, just a great gift in my life.
Wow, I love that. I think you said it so beautifully about experiences. I always feel that experience is what gives us depth. Experience is what gives us dimension and what also helps us to be more tolerant, I think. And this is something I've noticed a lot with colleagues and friends and people that I meet that have grown up in multicultural homes and environments, that because we're already experiencing more than one culture at a time, I feel that it gives us a little bit more tolerance and compassion and empathy towards others. That's not, of course, to say that it cannot be developed or learned, but I do feel that it already helps us to view the world with a slightly more open mind. Would you say that that's been your experience?
Yes, absolutely. I think in my home, both Middle Eastern Kurdish culture was extremely present on one side. On the other, although no family was in Russia anymore, I also had a very, very strong sense of Russian culture. And on top of that, I was going to school in the center of Stockholm. So, it's three totally different worlds because well, Scandinavian culture is a whole other thing. But what I am so thankful for, the more I think about it, is that my parents always wanted me to feel proud of where I come from. And they, I think, in their best way possible, and very gently and very seamlessly encouraged me to be a part of these worlds, of both the Kurdish and the Russian, in a way that became so natural to me that I think once I left and once I started to meet people, it was somewhat easy for me to relate with people because I just kind of had my antennas up. I think, growing up kind of soaking in languages and music and food, and I mean, all the things that culture really is, makes us so sensitive and makes us capable to relate to other people. We don't have to come from the same place, we don't have to speak the same language, but once you have been in touch with something, whatever it is, a closeness with your grandparents, or the importance of coming home at 7 every Saturday for dinner, these are all little things that connect us with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Even something like being rootless or feeling rootless. I think you and I have connected on this point when we've spoken before, that
Mm,
one has moved around a lot or has grown up with different cultures and has experienced also being a foreigner in many different cultures. It can leave us feeling rootless in a physical sense, but it also allows us to make roots in other ways. And I remember I always used to say when my parents lived abroad that home was wherever my parents were.
mm,
It was sort of just creating this feeling and this sense of home in a different way and roots in a different way. And it's something that I think about a lot because, I live in Spain. I'm not Spanish. I'm not from this country, but I feel at home here.
mhm.
And it's because I've made Madrid my home. It's because I've made this place my home, at least for the time being. Who knows in life, right? But it's I don't know, it's a very interesting way to approach it. It's like the roots are not deep, they're shallow, but they're strong. And they're maybe not necessarily generational, but they are intentional. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And this, what you say about home, and of course, in my life, I am very often asked, what is home to you, or where is home? And I've gone through different phases. Sometimes I've truly felt that home is where my family is. Other times I've felt home is wherever, as long as I have my people around me. Not physically, but just as soon as I hear that familiar voice, I feel better. But I think one thing that's important, what you say about being in Madrid and not knowing how long. I remember when I moved to America, I had no idea what that was all about.
Hmm.
I was 16 years old. I was one of few people in Sweden at the time that people, were very encouraging of me because the classical music bubble is very small. And um, and I was encouraged basically to leave and to go as far as possible. So that's why I ended up in the US. I mean, there was really nowhere further to go. So I arrived to America. I didn't know anything. I was in many ways quite clueless. And one thing I understood very quickly was that this was not just me going to study piano and be a good student. This was really a huge lifestyle adjustment. I mean,
Mm.
the cultural differences, right? Honestly, I really have to say that it was really kind of another level of acceptance of this new adventure, and learning how to adjust. And to be real, it's not like you adjust to one culture, you adjust to like 100 cultures in America.
Yes.
But that once I understood this, I became very, very eager to kind of become this global citizen.
Mm.
Because I
Yeah.
understood that if I sit here and I'm just gonna be doing the minimum that is asked of me, which was really just practice and go to your lessons and blah blah, I won't have the full experience and I won't know people. I won't know actually whom I'm playing with. And it's not really about getting to know every single person on a deep level, but as human beings, if we're given the opportunity to connect to someone, I really never hesitated because I had nothing to lose. I was by myself, I was 16, and having this very strong values that were instilled of me from both my parents or where they came from, and really really gave me a good ground.
Mm. Values, I think, are foundational for helping us to guide ourselves through life and find the path that works best for us. And I also feel very, very lucky that my parents instilled some very foundational values in me that also helped me to grow in many different ways, but hopefully positively. And I'm curious to know your experience growing up in Sweden, not looking like the people around you. And I say it specifically like this because I grew up in the States being an Indian in Chicago. I was one of maybe very few Indian kids in the school, maybe the only one in my class. I can't remember. But I remember always trying to assimilate instead of being proud of my culture because, in the 90s, everyone wanted to fit in.
Mm.
Now we celebrate differences. And I so appreciated what you said earlier about how your parents wanted you to feel proud of your cultures. And I think my parents did too, but also maybe with my personality, I was so eager and desperate to fit in with my own insecurities growing up. And it took a long time for me to truly be proud of my heritage and my culture and want that to be my guiding force because ultimately a lot of my values that I lead my life from actually come from my Indian roots.
Yeah, I definitely did not look like all the Swedish kids around me. And I had huge complex about that growing up. I never really thought too much about appearance and fashion and these things because I was a piano nerd on another level. But I was constantly reminded in very subtle but hurtful ways that I looked different.
Mm.
And actually, I grew up in a suburb called Fisksätra, which is basically, to this day, mainly immigrant families living there, or first generation, or whatever. But you don't see many Swedes around there. So that, in a way, also has been very helpful in my life because I grew up, I played with kids from all kinds of backgrounds. And that was my safety. This neighborhood where I live, this was my safety because every time I took the train into the city and went to school, although there were of course kids of different backgrounds, but I remember these group photos that you take every year in school.
Mm.
I remember I hated seeing them afterwards because I was the one with the brown hair. I was just the only thing I could see is how I didn't fit into the image.
Mm.
So honestly, those things were difficult. I don't think I talked about it. Actually, I'm pretty sure I never said anything about it because I felt very lucky to be able to play and to travel, and I don't know, the whole my musical life was so important to me, and I felt just always very grateful for all the opportunities I got. So I thought, oh, I'm not gonna complain, I'm not gonna, this is not something that is worth complaining about when I get to play here and there. But there were moments even after playing that people, adults, would come up to me and say, oh, your Swedish is so good. When did you get here? Things like this.
Yeah.
And that was extremely hurtful actually, because they just assumed, they because of their ignorance or whatever, there was just no way in their brain that actually they could have thought even that I'm from here.
Yeah.
So that was hard. That was hard. And in general, growing up, I didn't feel like I belonged very often in one place or the other. And I think that was something that really, was difficult for me, because I thought that, well, everybody has their place in life and you just have to belong to one thing. But then later I realized that no way, I don't want to belong to one thing, and actually you don't have to fit in to live a rich life. It's now everybody's so obsessed about image, and sometimes more image than actually the quality of what we do or our values as human beings. So now obviously I don't have any of those insecurities, and I don't beat myself up even for having had those thoughts.
Yeah.
But in the end, one of the good things about coming to America was that especially living in New York, I mean, every borough it's a whole new world. And so when you leave your comfort zone and you see places like that, you just think, wow, thank God I'm like this, and thank God they are like that. Otherwise, the world would just be awful, a boring place.
Absolutely. It's our differences that make us unique and give variety and depth and beauty to this world.
Absolutely. And for me, culture is everything. Everything that fulfills me in life, that's
Mm.
culture. And once you understand, or everybody is allowed to think and believe in whatever, but I really believe that culture can provide important social and honestly economic benefits. I mean, you improve your learning, you increase tolerance, and the most important thing, the ability of working together, or, coming together as a community. That for me just it makes life better. It increases the quality of life. So this all came to me in very strange moments, bit by bit. It's not like I sat down one day and I was like, this is what I believe.
Sure.
But by meeting people and by going through some really, really horrible things, I know that for a fact, being a foreigner in Europe has its challenges. But, living in the United States as a foreigner, regardless of your passport, is really difficult.
Yeah.
And there were moments that I felt really unseen and unheard, because people who live there, people that were born and raised, they don't quite get it, which isn't their fault. It's not their fault at all. But in those times when you're kind of left there alone, at least, I really had to start thinking and feeling and kind of let myself go through all this stuff, because it gave me a lot of confidence to do some risky things, such as moving a lot. But it's an endless journey. I mean, it's an endless topic. But I feel at a huge advantage in life because of all of this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I found it interesting before when you were speaking about belonging, this desire to belong when we're younger, and then now we don't care about it as much. And I wonder if it's more about the difference between belonging versus conforming. because growing up, I definitely tried to conform.
Mm,
I didn't want to celebrate my Indian heritage. I didn't want to feel different than the white kids. And of course, there were other nationalities in the schools, and I had a lot of friends from East Asia, but again, like second generation, like me. And that definitely helped to give me a little bit more of a sense of belonging and community. And I think that's a fundamental human need, to belong,
mm,
this feeling of belonging. And funnily enough, I think I started feeling that for the first time, truly, a little bit when I went to Curtis, because it was the first time that I was surrounded by other kids that were doing the same thing that I was. Because growing up, I always went to
mm,
normal public schools. And so I was always the odd one out. I was like the piano, they called me the piano girl. And,
mm,
I was out doing my lessons and competitions and master classes and concerts and everything, and traveling and not being there. And then finally, when I went to Curtis, suddenly everyone was doing the same thing. And I was like, oh my God, I'm finally part of a community.
mm,
But there was still that dichotomy of being the only person of my color, my race there.
mm, mhm,
And almost everywhere I've gone musically, I've been the only Indian or
mm.
one of very few. And actually, it was very funny. I think it was in my third year at Curtis, another Indian came to the school, a conductor, and suddenly the Indian population doubled. It was two of us. But, then I came to Spain and I went to Reina Sofia. I was the only Indian. Then I went to Hans Eisler. I was the only Indian. It already makes me feel separated. And at the same time, I don't even think about it anymore. I just
Yeah,
feel connected with my colleagues through music and through this other language that we
yeah.
speak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to you and I kept saying in my head, but that's your strength. That's your story, you know? I mean, we go through things in life behind the scenes, so to say, that nobody has any idea about, you know, and they shape us in ways that stay forever. The good and bad, you know, it's not all wonderful things, and pain
Yeah.
and loss and hurt and all these things, you know. We don't know ever what somebody is going through, you know.
No.
But for me personally, once I moved to New York, I kind of made this commitment to myself. I just said to myself, look, you're 24 years old, you're in New York of all places, you never thought you were going to be here. You've been through ABC. Life has been great, life has been quite shit. So please try your best to live in your reality, because your reality is not like anyone else's, and vice versa. And I still every day make a huge effort to live in my reality, because I know that this is my path, and it has given me a great sense of calm, because I know that I'm just me and I'm just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But I have to do that, you know, I have to continue to build this relationship with myself in order to really live life, you know, in order to really experience things. And it's not about having as many experiences as possible, but I think for me, you know, kind of coming to terms with my story and not be driven by fear.
But this is so beautiful what you say about living from your truth, living in your reality. This is so much about acceptance, I think, about accepting who we are, how we've come here, and even where we want to go,
Yes.
and accepting that our story is unique. And at the same time, I can promise you that there are people listening to this that are able to relate to like 90% of what you've said.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, I really think that life is really short. And without being melodramatic or something, in how should I say, my musical life has been very, very turbulent. Actually, now it's starting to come home, you know, find its place. But I remember when I lived in New York and, you know, being a student, New York, blah, blah, it's crazy. And I almost fell in that trap of looking around me and kind of panicking and just trying to do what everybody else was doing, because it was a very, very competitive and very hustle like music scene.
Mm.
Also, I mean, we had bills to pay and stuff, so it's you don't live for free, you know.
Yeah.
But there was a time there that I really thought, what is everybody doing?
Yeah. I understand.
What are you guys chasing? And I even found myself chasing something that I didn't know even what it was. Almost like this obsession to make sure you don't have one day free in the week, to be
Mm.
relevant, to prove something to someone. And that
All the time.
all the time, you know? And that was so painful. I remember feeling very alone and not able to talk to people about it, including some friends, because they had been eaten by this mentality, you know? And I
Yeah.
always felt that it wasn't my place to say anything, so I would sit in my Brooklyn apartment with some Bill Evans and wine and, contemplate all these things. And then, once I kind of felt that I've had enough of this. I came here trying to live in my reality, and my reality is so far away from actually what I'm doing right now that this all needs to stop because I don't have to prove anything to someone anymore. I cannot tell you how or when. I just know that there was a moment in spring 2020 that I just felt I don't need to prove anything to anyone. Life is not some measured thing that by the time you're this age, you're this and that. I know that society tells us, I know that social media is constantly reminding us of these things. But I just felt that I had enough of all of this, that in one way, I'm very grateful because I became very tough and I really kind of took pride in being a survivor when I lived in the US.
Mm.
Because whatever issue there was, I had to find a solution on my own. I didn't have parents around that could do my laundry, etc. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that just wasn't my story, you know?
Right. You were completely out of your comfort space.
Yes, and I just really reached the point where I felt, thank you for sharing this whole world with me, but I'm ready to go. And I left because I felt that this is not the space in which I can make music. And this is not the place for me where I feel that I will be seen or heard, rather, because it's not about being seen, but being heard.
Seen emotionally. Yeah.
Seen emotionally, and that's okay. And I know that many people, they probably thought, what, she's been here for 12 years and now she's gonna start over. But for me, it wasn't a start over. For me, it was a let me continue my life. And
Mm.
and I arrived in Brussels and I'm at the chapel, which is such a special place. And to be honest, I don't want to say that it's because of this or that, but I just think that all these journeys so far had to somehow happen. And in one way or another, I would have reached this point where I am at now, which is I feel that I trust myself playing.
Mm.
And I know that I've talked more about, all these feelings I have about life and whatnot, but obviously playing has been part of my life since I was 5. And my relationship with my instrument has always been very intense, but quite rocky. It's not been, some beautiful waltz. But I think that it's like growing pains of life, same thing with your instrument. And that's okay. If I didn't go through all of these things, I wouldn't have had the tools or the patience to sit with my instrument and figure it out. So somehow it just all goes hand in hand. That's why personally I cannot relate to people that, kind of have things in folders. life is one folder, vacation is one folder, music, I personally cannot relate to that because for me it's all together.
Everything influences something else.
Yes, yes.
I 100% agree with that. I think, yes, today we talked a lot about life experience, but that's exactly what translates into our music and how we feel with not only with our instruments, but with the art that we are sharing. Because most of us, if we are able to access those points, most of us are sharing who we are when we're on stage, not what we do. We're sharing who we are. And that comes through, and that's what makes every artist different and unique and special. And I mean, otherwise we would all be robots, right?
Yes, exactly. This I so agree with you about this. I think that, and by no means am I some like musical genius, but I appreciate so much when I hear people play and it's not about executing something well on their instrument. I mean that when I see people who are truly able and willing to be vulnerable on stage, um I can be so moved, I can be moved to tears by that easily, because I think that what we do is what is wonderful. I mean, I can't live without music, right?
Yeah.
It's this unbelievable thing that despite all the craziness that goes on, music can really transport you somewhere, at least even if it's for a short time being, but it can make you forget maybe what happened at work this afternoon, or it
Mm.
can just bring people together in the moment that it's being received. And I'm so thankful to be a part of this, I really am. But at the same time, there is real life as well, right? Everything that happens outside of our musical universe. And I put great importance in that. And somehow when the two come together and you are able to just kind of share that little piece with us, I think, wow, of course we are here. Of course we are doing music. I mean, this is what it's about. And I always say in my head, because I am a bit too shy to go backstage, but I always think to myself, thank you to this person who just really let us see them, let us be a part of what they are doing. In that this ability of inviting someone into your world on stage is just incredible,
It allows you to connect with their soul.
Yes, I mean it allows you to connect. Yes, exactly. But also it reminds you why you are doing this,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know? For me it's like that at least.
That's so beautiful.
We all have bad days, but when I hear and I see something like that, I just think, oh, thank you. I really needed that, you know?
That's so beautiful, and you've said it better than I could. For me, music is healing for myself, and the way I choose to share it, I mean, for me, just personally, always comes from a place of honesty and vulnerability because that's who I am.
Mm,
And that's the only way I know how to share myself with others on and off stage. And when I hear the way you speak about music and the experience that you have when you're sharing and when you're receiving, I relate a lot, and it's very beautiful.
mm. I mean, once you feel those goosebumps, that's it, I think. In life too, it's those little things. I think it's all in the little things.
And it's all related, like you say.
And it's all related, really. In my world, it's all related, and I wouldn't have it any other way, really.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Lana. Thank you for sharing your story with us and your thoughts. It's been truly a pleasure chatting with you today and exchanging our different and yet very similar experiences in life. So thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure, really. This made my day.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page at Conscious Artist Podcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.